I'm just a steward in this office. They've elected me, but I could be gone at any point. And I think it's important that anybody that's in this kind of position, or even in a CEO position, I don't take anything for granted. And, every day I come in knowing that I have a report card and I want to deliver, but at the same time, be well balanced, be healthy, be happy. I've got a family, I've got friends. I want all of it to be on that balance.
Hi, I'm Nick Warner. As a dad, a lucky husband, and as a business coach, I value people and relationships above all else. But next is winning, sustainability, and healthy culture. I've been a business owner for 25 years and served for decades as a special advisor to business and government leaders at all levels. Let's just say I've seen some stuff. My passion and my expertise are helping motivated professionals and businesses find the highest level confluence of what they want in life and business. This is what it feels like to be together at the top. Before we begin, I'd like to thank my sponsors, Scholes Brick and Rogaski, OM Incorporated, Three Bridges Consulting, and Kathy Olson at Ships and Trips Travel. Also, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show. District Attorney Jeff Reisig is arguably the most influential public safety figure in California, even if he's sometimes quieter and more respectful about it than his contemporaries. In 2005, Jeff told me over sushi in downtown Sacramento that he's a true blue prosecutor. I will never run for office, he said. I'm a courtroom prosecutor. Then a few months later, his long-serving boss decided to retire, and he tapped Jeff on the shoulder as his successor to face the voters. In the 16 years that Jeff Reisig has been the top prosecutor in Yolo County, he has been a leader in innovation, has cultivated bipartisan and multicultural relationships, has been in and out of media darling status, and has been a beacon of consistency and drive, all in a very, very tough profession. Jeff Reisig, where are you today? And say hello to the people at Together at the Top.
Thanks, Nick. And hello, everybody. I am in my office in Woodland, California, which is the county seat for Yolo County. And just so you know, Yolo County is not you only live once. We're one of California's original counties. We're sandwiched in between Sacramento to the east and San Francisco to the west.
Very good. Well, without too much ado, because we have a lot to cover, I'm really excited for this interview. Let's start with tell us in your words what you do for a living, Jeff. I think people know, a dictionary definition of what a district attorney is, but tell us in your words what you do for a living.
Sure. So I'm the elected district attorney here in Yolo County. I'm starting my 16th year. And before that, as you mentioned, I was a true blue prosecutor for 10 years before. So I've been 26 years as a criminal prosecutor and the elected DA for 16, which means I'm the chief law enforcement official for the county. I oversee not only all the criminal prosecutions, the criminal cases that are sent to me by the police agencies, but we also do environmental protection, civil enforcement of things like, unfair business practices and false advertising. I also oversee elements of the grand jury and just a whole plethora of things that most people don't even know the DA does. And I've got a big staff. I've got 120 people that I oversee, which includes about 40 attorneys, prosecutors, about 20 police officers, investigators, victim advocates, social workers, IT people, fiscal people, about 8 different unions work for me. And so it's a pretty complex operation.
Yeah, they call you DA. They could call you CEO or president just as easily. Tell us what you love most about being a prosecutor, Jeff.
Well, it hasn't changed from that conversation that you and I had back in 2005. I mean, I've always loved being a defender of public safety and keeping our community safe. I mean, it's still what gets me going every day is waking up and thinking about what can I do to help improve the quality of life for our families and make sure that victims are taken care of and that we stop the bad guys before they get out there and cause more harm.
Appreciate that. Tell us as we settle into some of the details of being an elected official, running a big office, media coverage, all these things. What do you find most difficult at the top of being the elected district attorney of Yolo County and a major player in criminal justice in the state of California? What do you find most difficult?
I think even now, I just find it so challenging to wade through the politics at the top and all the way going to the governor's office. And there down. And I never truly appreciated what was going on, behind the sausage factory, like what actually is being talked about and made behind those walls. And now that I know it, it frustrates me. And it's something that I'm committed to try and offer workable solutions on in my position. But wow, this is a big state and there's a lot of major challenges. And I'm just one DA of 58 counties, and I'm one. I've been doing it longer than almost all of them, but the politics never gets easy.
That is a true story from a 30-year lobbyist. Reflect that. That is very true. So I met you in college at UC Davis in 1988. At that time, you were a ripped out competitive bodybuilder and you were very serious, but you were also approachable, curious, and easygoing. I'm curious, was that fire always in there, Jeff? Did you know you were destined for big things? And what were the indicators that you had that next level drive and fire in your belly?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I've always been super competitive, and that is true from going back to youth soccer to college sports and, as you said, bodybuilding, and then as a lawyer. And I chose a field that obviously is in the trenches, in the courtrooms, battling it out every day. And so I think, yeah, that fire, that competitive drive is definitely what drove me in a lot of ways into this profession. Ironically, I started my career wanting to be a public defender, and I interned in the public defender's office. And it's there where I really realized that what I wanted to do would be better served out as a prosecutor.
On October 18, 2021, the Sacramento Bee wrote an article called Threading the Needle: Why California's Most Innovative Prosecutor Might Be in Yolo County. In that article, you said, quote, "I'm not an ideologue. I view our job more as threading the needle of criminal justice reform and public safety at the same time. What we were doing 20 years ago was just too extreme," you said. "It was not justice. It was one size fits all. Everything looked like a nail and we were the hammers. Now we view this more as there are a lot of gray areas and we need to be very strategic," close quote. In a polarized criminal justice, political, and media world, Jeff, you've managed to stay away from being branded, but they try like crazy to call you too soft, too tough, hardcore progressive, or a lock 'em up soulless prosecutor. You're none of these things. Are you a disruptor? And how do you stay above the partisan fray that limits your mobility to solve problems?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the district attorney is a nonpartisan position by law in California. And I believe that that's critically important. What we are supposed to do as DAs is pursue the truth, make sure that the system is treating people fairly, and I believe stay out of partisan politics. And so the whole time I've been in office, I've really avoided any of the extreme partisan debates, and I just stay focused on public safety. And in particular, I think a lot of the answers to the challenges we have can be found in the middle. And I've operated in the middle to the best of my ability on most issues. Although, as you said, people always want to paint me as it's either too soft or too hard or whatever. But we've got a lot done working in the middle. And so I just try to be very intentional about staying focused in areas where I think that we can bring people from the extremes together to move good policy down the road.
Let's talk about innovation for a minute. When we spoke in pre-production, a word you mentioned multiple times was innovation. I think most people would think of a prosecutor as someone who reviews the criminal file and essentially prosecutes the bad guy in court. What are you looking for in a third-party partner in both the product they offer and the type of people and organizations you want to partner with? And give us an example of an innovation you're particularly proud of.
So, government is really interesting in California because we have not been very innovative at all. In, my career as a prosecutor, I've looked around California when I first got elected and just thought, wow, we should be doing a lot better in utilizing technology, for example, than we are. I mean, we are the birthplace of the technology movement. Silicon Valley is a short drive from my office, yet here we are as prosecutors not using a lot of it. So I've been really focused on being an early adopter of technology and ideas that I think could improve both the efficiency of the system and the ultimate outcomes of the system through better data-driven decision-making. And one of the things that I've done a lot with technology, I was the first DA in the entire state to take my office paperless, which may not seem like a big deal to a lot of people out there, but again, trying to get government to do something as radical from going to a huge warehouse of paper to just a laptop was a major challenge for me. And we were the first to do it in California. Again, people are shocked by that. They would have said, oh, what wasn't it San Francisco or, Santa Clara County or LA? No, it was Yolo County. But more recently, one of the things I really am proud of and that we partnered with Stanford University to develop a race-blind charging system. And essentially what it does is Stanford built a program that strips the racial identifiers out of the police reports before my deputy DAs review them to make a charging decision. And the purpose of this is so that when DAs are reviewing the cases, we don't know the race of the suspect, the hair color, eye color, the street that the crime occurred on, and even the officer. And we're addressing both concerns about explicit and implicit bias in the criminal justice system. And we were the first DA in California to develop this partnership and then have that system by Stanford built into the DNA of our office, our case management system. And we've been doing that for a year. And it worked so well for us that last legislative cycle, we had a lawmaker that said, hey, let's make that a statewide law and have every DA do it. And so that has happened. The governor signed the bill, last month, a couple months ago. So that's a big deal. And I like to talk about it because I think the idea that Lady Justice should truly be blind is a nonpartisan statement. And it's a workable thing that we've proven in Yolo County. So that's the kind of stuff I get excited about.
That's the kind of thing to get excited about. I know a lot of people in this world, and I dialed your number 1530 for a reason, because we really wanted to hear about this, both as a prosecutor in terms of how you use the technology for your office, but also, as we talked about in pre-production, you're a CEO, you're a president of a company, of a law firm, essentially. It happens to be a public sector law firm in the Yolo County DA's office. But as a leader, when you talk about early innovation and you talk about, early adopter, that comes with somebody walking in your office or also calling your number and saying, hey, Jeff, hey, boss, this isn't how we do it. We've never done it this way. What happens from there when someone tells you it's not how we do it?
Yeah, that's great that you brought that up, because that's one of my pet peeves is when people say that to me. It immediately makes me feel challenged to prove that we can do it better, a different way. And maybe that's part of the rebel in me that originally drove me to work at the public defender's office. But, I just have learned again and feel strongly that there are always ways to improve the business and the way we conduct the business. And in my particular job, the business of the people. So I could sit here and give you dozens of examples of how we have taken the things that we've always done a certain way and then reached out, partnered with often third parties, not government actors, but private companies and individuals, and improved systems. And so I look at it as a challenge. That's still every single day. Right before I jumped on this call, I was having a conversation with my innovation officer about how could we further improve the system despite complaints that we've always done it this way.
So you have an innovation officer in your office?
I do. Yeah. A couple of years ago, 5 years ago, I created a district attorney's chief of innovation and transparency position, first of its kind in California in a DA's office. And the whole purpose of that was really to memorialize, make it clear that innovation and transparency are a priority to this office and to me. And we've done some awesome things together.
Really cool. I hope a lot of people are listening to that, because I can't think of too many big agencies that shouldn't have a transparency and innovation officer. I think it's a great trend you're setting. Hey, we glossed over, I like to go back to the type of person and the type of company you want to work with. What are you looking for? I'm going to guess you're not looking for somebody looking to make a quick buck, looking to use you as a way to springboard into huge business. What are you looking for in a partner, both organizationally and individually, frankly, in the executive or the people you're working with on the innovation technology side?
The primary thing is just a desire to improve the system. Criminal justice and criminal justice reform has been at the top of the scorecard for policy issues for over a decade, right? And I'm interested in working with people out there who are committed to try and improve the system without any hard political ideology. Again, just trying to focus on, things that are practical, that are doable, and that make sense. And honestly, in my position in a county that isn't rolling in money, I'm looking for people that are doing it often for free. And, I can sit here today and say that We were the first office to go paperless. We were the first office to implement race-blind charging. We were the first DEA's office in the country to put all of our data up on a transparency portal. All of these projects were completed in partnership with outside entities, and it was all done essentially for free. There was no, public money spent on this. It was simply leveraging the partnerships. And so, yeah, people that care or want to improve the system and are committed to wading through the bureaucracy of California's politics with me.
Yeah, appreciate all that. Why would they want to do it for free?
Because it's such major stuff. I mean, when you talk about race blind charging, for example, this is California was, and Yolo, we were the first to do it, but this is a major national movement. When you start talking about honoring the idea that Lady Justice is blind, how do you make that play out in the criminal justice system? We figured out one way to do it, and it's huge. And, Stanford, to their credit, recognized the value in this. They have research that supported this as a tool to help reduce bias in the criminal justice system. And at the end of the day, I could really get up on a soapbox and say, we're fighting for our democracy here. We're fighting to make sure that the people have trust in the system, in the criminal justice system, which is one of our most important, if not the most important system in our democracy. And so this is a big deal, I think. And I'm going around the country talking to my colleagues from coast to coast about why they should do it. And the fact that Stanford not only did it for free for us, but then offered up the program open source shows you they're committed to it as well.
Really impressive. Also, being an early adopter allows you special dispensation to tweak things, to try things, to partner with other agencies, because they're essentially beta testing something on your back. So it does give you more access to the people putting the system together and more input. So maybe it's mutually beneficial. If I hear something more important or something that gives me goosebumps on top of goosebumps, more so than honoring the idea that Lady Justice is blind this week, I'll be shocked. You could say that 100 times everywhere you go. I think it's so important. It's just Nick for Nick, but I just think it's fantastic. We appreciate your time. If you like what you've heard so far, do me a favor and leave a 5-star review and share with your friends. We'll be right back. The law firm of Scholes, Brick & Rogaski and partner Michael Rogaski are at the top of my list of go-to teammates. I have worked with their office for more than a decade on legal matters involving labor and human resource issues, contracts, savvy strategies to collect from that occasional naughty client, wills and trusts for my family, and even buying and selling a business. It's exactly true what their slogan says: big firm result, small firm service. Contact partner Michael Rogaski by visiting sbrlawsd.com. OM Incorporated is my go-to agency for digital marketing. I work with partners Andrew Thorne and Jennifer Wiles every day to market my business coaching practice. I get about half my business from the aggressive digital marketing strategy they design and run. OM developed nickwarnerconsulting.com and integrated a targeted digital marketing plan that matches me to high-quality clients. I'm also going to work with them on my 2023 rebrand campaign. Contact them at www.om-incorporated.com. Hey, Jeff, let's switch gears to you as an employer. We talked a lot about in pre-production about wanting to learn from you as an employer, not just a prosecutor. So let's switch gears a little bit. Smokeball.com released a report on legal industry trends and employee retention reports. They state, quote, employee retention is far from a new or novel concept, but it's arguably more important than ever before. An unprecedented number of Americans quit their jobs during 2021 Great Resignation, 47 million to be exact, leaving 49% of employers with roles are unable to fill. And while legal employment is at a record high, firm members are overloaded with work, and 1 in 5 attorneys under 40 says they're considering leaving the profession entirely. You run a law firm. It's, as I mentioned earlier, called the Yolo County DA's office. Are you good at attracting and retaining top talent?
We are, but it has been a challenge. I mean, what you just said has been true in our county and all across the country. I mean, I'm talking to elected DAs, again, from Florida to Maine to Alaska and everywhere in between. This is a real thing. And so we have been really, again, focused and premeditated on addressing this issue and creating an environment where we think we can not only retain the talent that we have, but recruit new talent. And I think we're doing really well. I mean, there's some strategies that, I think have been successful for our office, and I'm happy to talk about those too.
Well, you're blowing up my script because you keep saying things that make me go off script. What would have spoken to you, Jeff? I mean, I'm saying this, you're not saying this, but I know you and I've known you and I've watched you operate. I've watched you be a change agent. I've watched you deal with difficult things, wonderful things. But you're in the legal field as a leader, probably $1 million plus a year employee or owner. I mean, you're otherworldly talented. What would have spoken to you, let's say at that age or at these formative years of your career, to get you to come into a public sector law firm, as an example? How would you have recruited you?
The amount of discretion that we give people is a big draw. And, I hate bureaucracy. I hate red tape. I told you, the politics drives me crazy. The fact that there's so many things that can't get done because there's hoops that need to be jumped through. So I like to hire people who are self-motivated, who are driven, who are competitive, and want to have an open field to run. Now, we have good mentors. We have good training. We support people. I have an open door. I have people walking in and talking to me all day about the job. But, we make sure we advertise that that's the kind of office we are. People know when they come here that they're going to be challenged with some complex tasks pretty early in their career, unlike other offices where they may be preset and you've got to do 5 years as a junior lawyer before you can move up to the next step, et cetera. So that's just one way we do it. And that's part of the culture. The second part of the culture is, I think, what the media has reported about us. And you mentioned some of the things that the media has written about over the years that, we're proud of. And that is delivering a even-handed, balanced sense of justice in the community. And so people that tend to want to come here are like-minded. They see the system as much more nuanced than everything is a nail and we're hammers. That's not our job. And we've been really lucky. I mean, I've got a great team. And again, this is my 16th year as the DA. Most of my senior staff has been here with me all along.
Yeah, if you want to see an indication of good leadership and health and organization, look at longevity, look at turnover, look at recruitment is one thing, but retention, and then to have your leadership team or big portions of your leadership team in place for that whole 16 years, it's almost asked and answered. It's really impressive. How would you hope your current and past leadership teams describe your leadership style, Jeff?
Innovative, compassionate, driven. I think these are things that I hope when I'm gone that people will remember, that we took the office into a whole new realm. Again, as a law firm, as the DA's office, as one of California's 58 prosecutors, we've done things first that matter, like race blind charging, like putting all of our data up publicly for the people to see it and to analyze it and to criticize and to ask questions and to hold me accountable. I mean, these are all things that I didn't do them alone. I did them with my team. They're game changers for the entire criminal justice system, not just here, but across the country.
You've heard me speak, and we spent enough time ago. My favorite term in business is team sport, and you're describing team sport and then some.
Yeah, again, I mean, I don't have any illusions about it. I've got a great team, and to the extent that I've had any success as the DA, it's because I've surrounded myself with great partners in every single area, whether it's the deputy DAs, the investigators, the tech team, people in the private sector. It's about the relationships and those partnerships.
So I'm curious to marry up people walking in your office to give you constructive criticism and the fact that one thing that really triggers your competitive juices going is somebody telling you, you can't do that. We don't do it that way. How do those two things marry up where somebody might righteously come in and say, hey, boss, I have concern about these things, and you're getting competitive, wanting to prove your point? How do you marry those things up? Where does listening come in?
Yeah, I mean, it's not as if I just jump to an immediate reactive mode when somebody says, we've always done it that way. But I think those are the type of things that then make me want to ask more questions and have more conversations about, well, why do we do it that way? And, why can't we look at a new solution, even if it involves a modest change in the application of the law, which in my field as a lawyer, that's usually the biggest, hurdle to any change is the law. But I have these conversations all the time. And again, having a chief of innovation and transparency, I mean, one of the main reasons for that job is so that we can sit down and have those conversations about where can we challenge the status quo, and then encouraging conversations from the lineup about issues like that, which again, yesterday I had one of these conversations while I was getting a cup of coffee with one of my deputy DAs who just said, "Hey, I have an idea. Can I share it with you?" Yeah, absolutely. Tell me what it is. And we're working on it today. So again, government can be very just set in stone in so many ways. And I don't want to be that way.
So I ran the term disruptor by you earlier. You didn't bite. I'm going to come back again with refreshed bait to see if you'll bite, which is, I mean, part of being a disruptor is the term you use, which is challenging the status quo. Our last guest, Anthony Williams, who I think you probably know from, the state capitol. And also he's a big time guy at Amazon. We talked about disruptors, and we talked about being able to separate the nuance for disruption for good or disruption just for disruption purposes. Would you see yourself as a disruptor by asking the questions where can we challenge the status quo?
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, I haven't used that term, but as we're talking through this, I bet some of my colleagues, other elected DAs, would say I'm a disruptor because I am pushing always, on these policy areas, in particular with innovation that can make people uncomfortable only because, again, they've never done it that way. And it's a lot of work, and implementing some of these new policies and new tools actually requires major system changes. And in that regard, I definitely have been a disruptor among the DAs in California. And I prefer to describe it as an innovator. That's my self-described term. And I just think, again, there's so much room to improve the system. And I have a limited time as a steward in this office as the DA. That's what I'd like to leave as my legacy.
So we've heard some about, I really love this term. We'll come back to it. Disruption for good equals innovator. Or that's how I wrote it down. I'm on page 3 of my notes, by the way. I feel like I'm in a coaching session at the moment. Thanks for all that. So we're getting a sense of what you need, who you're surrounding yourself with, how you see the playing field. What can you not have on your team?
Wow. Well, that could be a really long conversation, but what's the old saying, certain people belong on the bus, certain people don't belong on the bus, and figuring out, how you make the personnel changes to get the right team. That was a big challenge for me early. And I spent a lot of time painfully working through those issues, those tough decisions. But I really have to have people around me that not only are open to change, but also open to challenging me about any issue. And I'd make that really clear that I want to have conversations, honest conversations with my team at all levels about what's working, what's not working. Don't necessarily want anybody to agree with me just because I'm the DA. That doesn't get us anywhere. Tell me what you really think and challenge me. We do it respectfully always, but that's probably like leadership 101 for any good leader. They'll say that, but I believe that's been critical for me. Making good decisions is having those people come in and say, "Hey, you know what? Have you thought of this? This may not be the best way to go." And I really appreciate being challenged.
I love a little humility. We have a growing, pretty diverse and loyal listenership. And there's a fair number of people listening to this right now, figuring out and realizing this is why Nick asked Jeff Reisig to be on the podcast. Because you live inside your brain, Jeff. I have benefit of being a business coach. I work a lot across a lot of different business lines. I work with a lot of leaders. Most of the leaders that gravitate toward me are more toward your way of thinking and the people I gravitate toward. But and I know there's a lot of, I got the business card that says I'm the boss, and it populated my brain with all the answers. And the last thing I want to do is hear from you why I'm not doing well, get constructive criticism. I'm not building a team around me for that point. So it's one of the things that really attracts me to you. It's why I really like to learn from you, and why we're all getting a chance to listen to you and learn from you, frankly. What are you better at today as a leader than you were when you took over the office 16 years ago?
Surviving the hits in the media and the political world, just not taking any of it in. I'm way better at that. I think, early on in my career, I was much more susceptible to letting the attacks and the criticism hurt. And I was naive when I first became the elected DA. I had no idea. I didn't want to be a politician. And then I got elected, and all of a sudden I'm an elected figure, and that has liability. But I've learned to deal with all of that and just push forward and not let it slow me down.
Praise and criticism. I mean, I'm curious, and I guess you're answering how you smooth out the emotional highs of winning 4 straight countywide elections, which is as difficult as it may be, and a few of them or a couple of them were, way more people in the county like you than not. So that should feel good. And the deference and praise that comes with it. And then you balance out against nonstop criticism, case by case, day by day in just about every newspaper you can find. So I'm hearing how you balance that out maturity, letting some of it slide off your back. I'm guessing being guided by an office wide sense of we're doing the right thing. And if we're doing the right thing, then whatever comes with that.
Yeah, I mean, the same way that I try and do the job as DA, which is by a balanced approach, being tough where I need to be tough, being empathetic and compassionate where I need to be there, is kind of how I live my life, I guess, as a leader. The balanced approach is equally as important. And I do that through taking care of myself physically, making sure I have good leadership coach who through the years has helped me in many ways, having a good support system of colleagues that I can talk to honestly about sensitive issues, never getting too confident in, my position, because I think, again, I'm just a steward in this office. They've elected me, but I could be gone at any point. And I think it's important that anybody that's in this kind of position, or even in a CEO position, I don't take anything for granted. And, every day I come in knowing that I have a report card and I want to deliver, but at the same time, be well balanced, be healthy, be happy. I've got a family. I've got friends. I want all of it to be on that balance.
Let's talk about leadership, picking up from where you are right now. You mentioned working together, and that's not a prevalent term these days. You said that a couple times in pre-production, nor is common ground another word that you use freely. You told me in pre-production, relationships are the number one secret. You also said relationships and listening make the job so much more fun. Tell us about your experience and your mindset as it relates to leadership, working together, and common ground, finding common ground.
Well, it's interesting because as the DA, when we go to court, we're obviously in an adversarial proceeding with the defense attorneys, and we have a very defined role there, which doesn't necessarily translate into the second part of my job, which is, not only running the office, but working with stakeholders on the outside, whether it's on changes in the law or changes in internal policy. And that involves a lot of conversations with people on, frankly, other professions and other points of view that sometimes are radically different than mine. And so a lot of it that I've learned over the years is just about really being okay with somebody completely disagreeing with my policy, my view, the view of the world, whatever, but listening and trying to find areas where there's some common ground, some agreement on an area that we could work on to improve the system. And I've done that pretty effectively with my community through advisory groups that I've created with people who, many of whom don't support the police, the DA, but they have real strong views on criminal justice. Well, I meet with them on a regular basis. We talk about the issues, talk about solutions, talk about what they'd like to see. And it's actually helped drive policy change for me because I've found ways to honor both my views and their views in workable ways. Same thing with the legislature, helping to sponsor laws that I believe are good policy. So yeah, it all comes down to those relationships. And I think I just know that I've got to be humble and go into these conversations and realize that probably every single person has something to offer the issue and the conversation.
I love all that. But you're not perfect. You said for every success, I've had 100 failures or more. How do you handle failure internally in your head and externally with your staff, your colleagues, the media, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. And I did say that our successes are easily outnumbered by our failures 1,000 times, right? And that's part of being an innovator or disruptor, I think, is taking chances. They're calculated risks. And what I like to say is, when it comes to people's safety in my job, like the number one concern for me is keeping our community safe, keeping people safe, and taking care of victims. I'm not going to expose that constituency to big risk. So when I talk about taking risk, I'm talking about, in policy changes and technology tools that, again, improve the system or improve the outcomes, but don't expose people to physical harm. And so when I say, the failures easily outnumber the wins, the failures don't result in anybody getting hurt. Maybe my pride a little bit, but that's just part of the gig. That's part of getting better and being an early adopter is not everything is going to succeed. But I'll just point back to race blind charging again, or being the first DA in the country to have all of our data up on a transparency portal. Those are major, major wins for justice. for the system, for the public confidence in the system. And those came after lots of tries and fails in other areas. But I just really believe that. And I try and infuse that approach into all of my team. Like, let's take chances. Calculated chances are okay.
But inoculating your core base, and this would translate from the DA's office to a sheriff's office you want to stay in public safety, or to almost any company on earth where, let's say, for example, you want to change your point of sale system. You want to change your cash register. You want to change the system where a server takes an order and gets it into to the kitchen. I mean, that's all with risk. So what do you have? You have a paper pad in your hand. So you've got redundancies to make sure you're not trying new technology. Yours are probably much more dangerous because there's public safety involved, but there's a great business axiom in that I'm recognizing from you, which is be an innovator, try new things, take all the input, but do not put your core constituency or your core mission at risk while you're doing it.
It's a great analogy. It's spot on too. I mean, you could easily translate what I just said over to the private industry in a million different ways.
So we've been really fortunate to learn from some of your successes and some of the things you do and your thought process for sure. And now we're starting down a little bit of a road, which I promise we won't stay on too long because there's not much to the failure, to the failure is part of the discussion. But one of the other places where you didn't have probably quite the success you had envisioned was in your married life. And so you're on your second marriage. You have 2 young kids at 53, when frankly, most people, myself included, are empty nesters and just starting out. In an article called Marriage After 50, Midlife Divorce Recovery, they state, quote, marriage after 50 can be just as exciting as marriage in your 20s or 30s. After all, 50 is supposed to be the new 30. I will tell you, my joints don't support that at the moment. After 50, after a divorce, if we have done the healing work we need to do, we usually have a clear idea of what we're looking for. So one of those, quote, 100 failures, as you mentioned, was in your first marriage. Not all things in life are linear. They're not all a straight process, but we'd love to hear how hard was it to go through that divorce? How did it impact your work? How was the process of getting back on your feet? And now at 53, you have 2 beautiful young children and a wife you sure seem to adore. Tell us about that journey, if you would.
Sure. Well, when I made the decision to run for DA back in 2005, I was married, and my wife at the time was a medical resident. So the bottom line is I was totally out of balance, and she probably was too, by the nature of what we were doing. And I was a neophyte in politics, and I ran a campaign. It could be anything, taking on a new job as a CEO or any other position that's high stress, high hours, high demand, people constantly wanting, you engaged. And I was out of balance, and my marriage is what I lost. And so, I learned a lot from that. And when I referenced earlier how important it is, now I know as a leader to keep that in balance, it's personal side is critical. I do have a family now. I got remarried and I have 2 small kids, and I'm late to the game. I realize that, but I love it. And it's my priority as much as this job is, more so, obviously, my family. And every day I'm in my mind, making sure I'm very deliberate about carving out significant time for my wife and my kids. I just think you can't do a job like this successfully, or any CEO job, without really putting balance as a top priority. I cannot lose again in this realm with my family. It's too important to me. And I had to learn a hard lesson early on.
So much we learned from you, Jeff. Really appreciate you sharing that. We appreciate your time. If you like what you've heard so far, do me a favor and leave a 5-star review and share with your friends. We'll be right back. Kathy Olson at Ships and Trips makes travel planning so easy. She says she's a travel agent, but I experience her more like a travel concierge. Kathy has helped my family and friends plan countless trips over the years. She always puts in the extra effort, even calling local shops to find us off the beaten path snowmobile tours, local accommodations, or even to call in advance to make sure our rooms are correct. We love working with Kathy. Call her at 209-518-1625 or email Kathy with a C at shipsandtrips.com. The video 3 Bridges Consulting produced for NickWarnerConsulting.com has increased my sales and the quality of the leads I get. 3 Bridges believes defining and then telling a company's story to the right audience is the most important step in a successful marketing plan. It's not uncommon for a new client to tell me the video on my website was the reason they called me. These guys really know how to use video to help you sell your services. Contact Dennis Williams or Sean Springman by visiting www.threebridgesconsulting.co. What's next and what are you excited about for the next chapters? I'll just set it up to say you're 30 years into being a public employee, elected official, and top prosecutor. Nobody stays forever, Jeff, and you're only 53. So indulge me. Let's talk about the afterlife for a minute. Whether you decide to exercise your brilliance outside of being a DA or not, your skill set really should transfer well. And I'm fascinated as a business coach by your utility, frankly. What are some of your thoughts about the afterlife after DA, if there's such a thing?
Right. If there's such a thing. One of the rules in politics is you never admit that you're not going to run again, because then you're a lame duck, right? So I don't have any immediate plans to leave this job. I still love being the DA and the chief law enforcement officer in the county, and I'm going to be here for one more term at least. I just got reelected. As you said, it's my 5th term. But what excites me and what I'm able to do in this job, which could translate into the private sector, revolves around the innovation in criminal justice and government systems that has allowed me to travel across the country and talk to DAs in dozens of different states and testify before the legislature in states across the country on different policy changes and law changes that we've helped sponsor, that I've helped sponsor in California. So, if I were to ever leave, I think there's something for me there. I've got an understanding of the inner workings of the largest criminal justice system in America, California's. And I have, proven that you can make changes. You can improve the system through innovative partnerships, at least, in our experience, in ways that have never been done before, through partnerships with whether it's Stanford or Measures for Justice, which is the nonprofit we partnered with on the transparency portal. So we'll see. I mean, I'm open to ideas all the time, but right now I'm really loving my job.
That's a great place to be. But again, I'll go back to, you have a lot of utility. So you might just stay in that chair and people come pick at you and try to pick at what you know and try to get you on their team. I'm sure that happens all the time, but I've not seen you waver for 1 second in your commitment to what you're doing. But you're 53 and we'll see how it goes. You've been in the job for a long time. You say you're not a commodity. We'll see someday. Tell us what you're excited about. And one thing you've been great with me is putting podcasts or books in front of me that expand my thinking. Tell us what you're excited about, and even a podcast or a book that you're into right now.
Wow. I consume so much information in my role as a DA, and a lot of it, probably not surprisingly, is in the criminal justice area, because I've got 7,000 criminal cases a year coming at me. I'm having conversations with DAs and police chiefs and sheriffs about, all of the changes in the law. And I think what still excites me, and the reason I'm in this position, is I see real hope for changes in California's policy when it comes to how we deal with the seriously addicted and the mentally ill and the homeless population. This is the number one issue in our state. And whether you're public sector or private sector, I think everybody would agree with that. And so I get excited about the fact that I think there are answers in the middle that have traction. I have the ability to get an audience with lawmakers and potentially even the governor to help drive good policy. So that's what I'm focused on right now. And I'm excited about some of the things that I'm working on to help deliver real practical solutions in that area. And that's probably doesn't surprise you to know that. I mean, I really am. I'm totally preoccupied with those types of issues.
Just little things like homelessness, drug addiction, crime, mental health. And I will say, just Google Jeff Reisig. If you think I'm making this up, if you think he's just saying he's into it, he's got 20 years of being a leader in this industry. And frankly, what I think was, this is a political observation on a business show, but what I think might have been an albatross for you is you're really a man without a party. And frankly, so am I. I'm independent. Is really now potentially a strength for you because of the industry you work in. You've got audience on both sides. I've seen you sponsor bills from your office to get passed by Democrat legislators, some Republican legislators. You're an issue guy, and there's not too many left in electoral politics, Jeff.
Yeah, I agree. And I really, again, tried to stay in that middle zone because that's where I am. But it also has given me access, as you said, to both sides. And even within California's DA population, I told you there's 58 DAs in California, 58 counties. And last year, I had the privilege of being elected by them as the president of the California DAs Association, which means I was able to go to the Capitol and around the country as the president of the California District Attorneys Association, which is, made up of DAs, some of whom are very conservative, some are very liberal, some are in the middle, but they trusted me. They elected me overwhelmingly as the president because I do have a reputation of being in the middle, I think. So, as I go forward working on solutions for some of these big challenging problems, I'm going to stay in that zone and see if we can't get some good policies passed at the state level, because that is where the solutions are to the homeless and addiction issue.
They say, Jeff, you're in the middle. You're so wishy-washy. Nick, you're in the middle. You're so wishy-washy. I say, I'm not wishy-washy. I'm open-minded. I'm listening. This notion that he changed his mind. She changed her mind. Oh my goodness, that's terrible. Not to me, it's not. Did she get new information that further informed her opinion? That's one of the reasons I hold you on a pedestal is I've seen you evolve your positions. I've seen you evolve your approach. And my strong sense is what we heard on this podcast today is it's active listening mixed with a lot of caring, not being dug in, taking the parts that work from both sides and seeing if you can listen and put together a solution that either both sides don't hate. And it might not just be Republicans and Democrats. It could be victims in law enforcement, for example, or it could be advocates in law enforcement, for example, but taking parts, component pieces where there is agreement and actually solving the parts that can be solved while you work on the macro issues together. But it's not wishy-washy. It's open-minded. Do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's, as you're speaking, I'm part of what I'm thinking about is, staying out of the extreme partisan debate that's going on is a lot like friends of mine who are in the private sector being challenged to stay out of the culture war as a CEO or as a president. It's really challenging because there's so much bait being thrown out at us as leaders all the time to pick a side, pick a side. If you don't pick a side, you're this or that. And that doesn't really, picking a side isn't going to help me in a lot of the issues that we're working on. And I don't think it necessarily helps a lot of people in the private sector when they pick a side on some of these real hot button issues either. I stay focused on the work, on my constituency, on trying to make a difference. And the middle is where I am. It really is where I am. And that's where the answers are.
It's also where the best place to listen is from. You can pivot, you can hear in the round when you're in the middle.
Agreed.
My favorite part of the show is getting to summarize back to you and to our listeners the things that I've taken away. And I've said before on the show, I'm the coach. And so I'm supposed to be doing the teaching, but on this show, you are the coach and you are doing the teaching. And I've got a lot of takeaways. I suspect there's more. When I listen to this, I'm guessing I'm going to pick up a whole lot of ways to think about things, way to talk about things. I'm struck by a number of your notions. Competitive, without question. It's rare that you meet a leader, especially of your ilk and at your level, that's not competitive. I would surround competitive with curious and creative. I love curious, competitive, and creative. I think you're all three. We've talked a lot about nonpartisan and staying above the fray, and you illustrated why that has enabled you to listen better. I was really struck by the fact the way you talk about early adoption and early adoption on things that matter. You talked about we're going to implement things first that matter. Data-driven decision-making, race-blind charging is two really good examples. So it's not just being an early adopter, it's an early adopter on things that matter, not just to adopt. I love this notion of chief innovation and transparency officer. It may exist in the corporate sector. I think it does around diversity to some degree. And I've heard the term transparency in some public safety agencies, but chief of innovation and transparency, I think is very, dare I say, innovative. And if company leaders or even HR folks that are listening to this call, I think that's a really interesting title, and it portends things. It speaks for the leadership. It talks about just the title alone, just the fact that person is there in that office. If they're good, it's even better. But just the fact you have that position there must say something to the people you work for and with, I would think, Jeff.
I think so. I mean, I'm a big believer that in order to build trust, public's trust, that they need to be able to see and understand what our policies are, why we're making the decisions we're making. I think it's equally true in the private sector. I mean, I think there is, I can point to a lot of industries where I think the public's confidence in the product has decreased because of a lack of transparency in the studies or the data that went into the decision making, the policies. And so to me, the idea of being transparent, it goes to the heart of I want the public to trust the criminal justice system in my jurisdiction. And in order to do that, they need to see the data and be able to challenge me on the data. And that's why I hired this position and created this position to be transparent and to be innovative, to figure out ways to get more data to the public. It's been, an overall, success for us doing that. And, I've engaged in conversations with some of my biggest opponents on the data that's, validated by a third party. It's been completely vetted by somebody outside my office, and just having a conversation on really tough issues. Often in my world, that's about, issues of criminal justice system and racial bias. We've had some amazing conversations, and we've reached some amazing solutions to really complex issues.
As it relates to hiring and retention, I'm struck by this notion of discretion as a draw to employment. One of the things we see with young people, whether it's coming out of college, going to Enterprise Rent-A-Car, or name your big employer, Intel. I don't mean to pick on any one company, or a big law firm. Your first 3 to 5 years, you pointed out, are pretty well predetermined. You're going to build 2,000 hours. You're going to look in the code book. You're going to support the sales staff if you're at Enterprise, but it kind of is what it is. And so this notion in a tough to recruit and tough to retain environment where employees have a lot of options and a lot of decisions to make, or options at their disposal, this notion that you're going to actually be able to operate here. You'll have supervision. You mentioned training and mentoring, but we're going to allow you to make some professional judgments and to have input. I think that's a really interesting and evolved way to recruit. It has to be true or you won't retain, but it's a really interesting way to recruit.
Well, and keep in mind, in my sector, in public sector, it's the money isn't the draw. We're not competitive with private sector. And so people are naturally coming here, not for the money, but for some other purpose, and offering up things like enhanced discretion, the ability to get out into public. We offer all the time different avenues for our employees to engage in things that are public facing, where they represent the office. And it's just been, great to see so many people come here because they have seen evidence of our involvement in the community for years, and they want to be a part of it.
I like this notion of disruption for good equals innovation. You didn't say it that way. I wrote it down that way, but you bristled a little bit early on at the notion of being a disruptor because it has negative connotations, but a disruptor for good, I would say, is an innovator. I got it from you, but I really like that a lot. I wrote it down, so I might steal it as my own.
It's fair. I mean, I've never said I was a disruptor, but I think, again, my colleagues might say that I have been, because I've really forced the issue on a lot of this innovation with technology and transparency and race blind charging. I mean, the governor signed 2 bills last cycle that were a direct result of my sponsoring legislation. 1 dealing with race blind charging, and 2 with transparency portal, putting the data out there. Now every DA is going to be required to do it. I think it's great. I think it's, again, it goes to public trust. It's a lot of work. It is disrupting in that sense that it's going to require some of my colleagues to up their game with their technology. But in the end, it's going to serve the state of California in a positive way. So I'll take that disruptor for the good.
Absolutely. And to anybody who's listening to this show, who's a manager, an aspiring manager, a current leader, or an emerging leader, this notion of I'm tough where I need to be tough. And I bring it up in this context because, Jeff, you have all the power. You're the elected official. You're a constitutional officer. You're the head of your statewide, or were till a few weeks ago, the head of your statewide association. You're long tenured. You know more than most people in the game. You have all the power to be tough all the time and to just have it the way you want it. What you said was be tough where it's appropriate to be tough, and empathetic where I can be. And empathetic isn't always give me a hug and send me on my way. Empathetic is genuinely listening to people's situation. It could be family, working conditions. They might want to move to another unit. They may have a particularly strong opinion, or it could manifest in a number of different ways, but it doesn't always have to be because I'm the boss, I told you so. And I hear a real nice balance of, at times I'm going to need to be tough, not always internally, it could be externally. And at times I'm going to really try to be empathetic and listen all the way through, and maybe even act differently at the end.
Yeah, there's a lot more gray areas as a leader than clearly defined. That's another way to say it. And as I look out at what's going on in California with, a lot of the criminal justice policies, hard, no exception policies are generally, in my opinion, bad policies, because there's so much gray, at least in what I do.
This notion of being totally out of balance, we approach it, I guess I set the table for you to approach it in the negative, but in the positive, to state how important balance is, the physical, the mental, the family. And you said a really important phrase I want to play back to you, but also to our listeners, is carving out time for family. You didn't say, I'm hoping I'll make time. I hope my schedule will relent. If you've worked with me or heard me, you hear me say hope is not a strategy. Carving out time on your busy executive calendar for your wife and your kids is a strategy. Hoping you find time in your 60-hour work week is not an effective strategy.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it really is premeditated about saying I am going to set time all week, every day for my family. Now, things come up that are emergencies and require me, obviously, but I've got plenty of discretion to work my calendar and my schedule so that I have that time when I need it. And I encourage that with all my staff. I mean, there's not a single person who works for me that doesn't know that's how I feel. And that family, literally, it's the first most important thing, period. And we're going to work with you to find the solution that helps you achieve that balance. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. That's what happened to me. And I lost a marriage and was really unhappy for a long time.
Yeah. I think we leave it right there. I don't know what's more important than family and balance and sanity. Jeff Reisig, you have done an amazing job on this podcast. We're so grateful for your time and insights and opportunity to learn from you. Thank you also my awesome researcher, Anna Padalico, our outstanding production crew led by Daniel Link, Jimmy Brannon, and Riley Byrne at Podigy Podcast Productions. Please join us next month for another episode of Together at the Top. Thank you so much for your time. Together at the Top thrives off listeners like you. To stay connected, follow our socials in the show notes and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll be releasing our show on the last Tuesday of every month. See you next time. At Nick Warner Consulting, we exist to coach and consult motivated professionals. I meet with you on Zoom in focused 90-minute sessions, working toward your goals and developing next-level business skill sets. My job is to add value to your organization and your career. To learn more, visit www.nickwarnerconsulting.com or call me directly at 916-765-3576.